and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the To-Do List. I'm your host, Eric Fisher, and this is the podcast where we talk to the people behind the productivity. This week, I'm sharing a conversation I recently had with Derek Coburn, the author of Networking is Not Working, his new book. I had the privilege of meeting Derek at Social Media Marketing World, and he actually refers to it as a productivity book that is hidden inside a networking book, and it's true. So, I think you'll find some really cool tips and tricks. But before I share that conversation, I want to say thank you to Boomerang for Gmail for sponsoring this episode of Beyond the To-Do List. With Boomerang for Gmail, you can conquer your inbox, and you can get a free 60-day trial of Boomerang, the #1 Gmail service that millions of users rely on to stay on top of all their emails. Boomerang adds its powerful functionality directly into the Gmail interface, so you just install Boomerang in your browser, open Gmail, and you're ready to start using email much more productively. Boomerang for Gmail lets you snooze your emails until you need them, track replies to your emails so you don't forget, schedule emails to be sent at any time, and it's available for Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and Android. Listeners of the Beyond the To-Do List podcast can get a special offer to try Boomerang for 60 days. Go to boomeranggmail.com/todo for your free 60-day trial of Boomerang Professional. Again, that's boomeranggmail.com/todo for 60 days of free Boomerang Professional. Well, this week I get to bring you Derek Coburn, and let's see, we met at Social Media Marketing World, and so interestingly enough, that event had so much time set aside for networking, and that's what we're going to talk about. So, welcome to the show, Derek.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So, yeah, you came up to me, gosh, it was Social Media Marketing World, an awesome event by Michael Stelzner. And, my impression of that was it was one of the best conferences I've ever been to. I think you'd probably say likewise. It was very fun. And what was your networking strategy when you were there? Why were you there anyway? Because it doesn't really feel like Social Media Marketing World fits in with what you're doing other than the book.
Yeah, so it really doesn't. I mean, I went last year because my good friend Marcus Sheridan invited me to go, and through Marcus, I met a number of really great people there, and came back this year where obviously he was doing the closing keynote. So. Right. One of the main reasons I was there was really to support him, but also, I just like meeting smart people, and my approach to networking is always just, how can I add value for some of my existing clients or members or people in my network. I'm not going there looking to see what I can get out of it. I'm going there to see, maybe I can introduce this person I know for this great podcast, or maybe I know someone in my world who could add value for this author. So I'm not really focused on myself when I go to these events.
So it's almost like a kung fu, like your water, and the networking passes through you. So somebody, you know what I mean? Like it's like you're connecting all these other people. You're not doing it for. I mean, it's a benefit to you, obviously, and we'll touch on more of this later. But the fact that networking is, best done without ulterior motives. Like if you're just going into it to get out of it, then you're going to get less out of it.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and I think that's kind of where it ties into the whole productivity thing. It's people want to get more out of their time. They want to milk their time, so to speak. They want to squeeze that hour and get the most out of it. And yet that kind of is almost, not that being strategic and being productive is great when it comes to networking, but when you apply that, I'm going to milk this for all it's worth, you almost tend to go more towards the selfish side of it. Don't you think?
Yeah, and I think so. And I think that's why a lot of the people that you want to meet when you go to these events, they're not there because they show up over time and they are approached by people that are really playing the what's in it for me game. And I think when you get to a certain point in your business where you're successful and you have a number of great clients, you have less time to spend at networking events. And I think social media marketing world, to your point, was different. It's great. There's a lot of people there that are coming together for the same reason. So it's not like a typical event where you have no idea what you're getting yourself into, and why is this person here and what are they looking for? There's a common theme, which is pretty good. But I think leading with yourself, it doesn't work, and the people that continue to do that end up making it really bad for the rest of us.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of something I want to touch on in a bit. So let's move backwards. Let's go back to the beginning, so to speak. And I'm really interested. I mean, I met you fairly recently, and you struck me as a taller guy with a better beard and with hair on your head, unlike me. And so I was like, oh, here, this guy's where it's at. And not to go into beard envy or anything, but
you got a strong beard, Eric.
True,
I wouldn't sell yourself short.
Well, okay, so my hair's on my chin, and yours is on your forehead, or top of your head, I should say. That would be weird if your hair was on your forehead. Anyway, but you came up to me and you expressed interest, you said thank you for doing this show, and you talked about the fact that you enjoy it, you get a lot out of it, you have ADD, which I do as well. I don't think I've ever shared that, actually. Have I? Anyway, whatever. It's kind of coming through right now, actually. And anyway, I'm interested in hearing more about your story, about your financial background and creating Cadre and your work with your wife. Let's talk about that a little bit, and then let's move forward into what that background has brought to you and kind of why you decided that networking wasn't working.
No, definitely. So going back, I started in the wealth management business in 1998, right out of school, and was pretty successful out of the gate, especially by their metrics in terms of, bringing on new clients and qualifying for trips, and, going fast forwarding to 2008. We had just gotten married, and we're getting ready to have our first kid. And I was realizing I was staying awake until 2-3 o'clock in the morning every night because I would have 20 browsers open. I would get distracted very easily, and the reality was I could accomplish a lot in 15 minutes every day, and that sort of enabled me to not be as productive or as organized as I could have been. So I went and I got checked out and was diagnosed with really hardcore ADD and started taking medication. And the third day I was on medication, I was going to Florida for a wedding from DC, and for the first time ever, I sat still for 3 straight hours and read a book start to finish, and it was sort of like a very big wow moment for me, which then led me to write, a 300-page systems manual and hire other people for my wealth management business. And I just got really organized to where I had this extra time, and that extra time is what led to the creation of Cadre.
So what was a typical plane trip like for you before that point? Would you avoid it altogether, or were you just couldn't sit still?
Yeah, I had literally like 5 or 6 books open at once. I would read a few here, a few there. I might have pulled out on a plane. I might have pulled out Angry Birds or done some email. But by the time I graduated, I had 400 on the verbal section of my SAT. I had read one book by the time I graduated college, and I've literally in the last 5 years, I've read over 500 books, and I just wrote one. So it's pretty crazy to really think about how much it was hurting me, at least in that area of my life.
Yeah. I don't have it to that extent. I have it and it's actually why I use productivity as kind of versus any kind of a medical treatment, because I found that, at least at the time, this was like 10 years ago almost, that medication didn't really do it for me. The side effects were worse than the actual, state of being I was in prior to taking them. And so it was like, all right, well, let's just get into GTD and let's figure this out. And I did, and Inbox Zero and all that. So So that's where I went with it. So then, okay, so Cadre, you're doing financial stuff, you're having breakthroughs productivity wise, and you're hustling. So what is Cadre?
So Cadre is really what. Well, all right, I'll give you the higher end. So Cadre stands for Connecting Advocates, Deepening Relationships Exclusively. And right now we're in DC and Baltimore. We have over 100 CEOs, business owners, entrepreneurs. We bring people together online, offline, mostly offline, for different formats, different types of events. And the thing that differentiates us from other professional organizations is we're vetting for some intangibles. We're vetting for quality and, are you successful and are you really good at what you do? But also we're bringing together pay it forward people that really are passionate about and interested in meeting others and learning how they can help them and add value for them, as opposed to pushing their own stuff.
Gotcha. Okay, and that kind of then seems to be embodying what it was, or what it is you're talking about when you talk about unnetworking in the book.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so I started with my wealth management business before Cadre was ever even a thought or an idea. I had built my own 20 to 25 person, I called it now an unnetworking group. And it was some of my better clients who own businesses, some of their key advisors and vendors, if you will, and then a few others that I went out and I handpicked. And I was hosting roundtable lunches and wine tasting events and just had all these different ways of bringing people together. And it was not something I was charging for. It was just me really finding ways to do even more above and beyond what was expected of me as a financial advisor. And that worked well, and a lot of what I learned there is what is baked into Cadre right now. And
so, when you first told me, that the book was called "Networking Is Not Working," the word nerd in me just jumped out and said, "Well, wait a second, not working could almost be one thing or another." And so, on one side, it could be that that the current state of networking and what we've been doing isn't working, or it's not going to work anymore in terms of getting real networking done, or that networking is not working. In other words, it shouldn't be as hard of work as it has been. In other words, does that make sense? Definitely.
And so, I'm 100%. I'm almost 100% stressing the working. I'm not suggesting that it's fun. I'm not playing that angle. I'm more saying I think the model is broken. I think the way most people approach networking and what they use to measure their success while networking is broken, and there are better ways to do things, especially from a productivity standpoint.
Okay, so it's almost like we're asking the wrong questions. We're aiming at the wrong goals when it comes to what we think of automatically when we hear the word networking. Is that right?
I think so. I mean, I think if you asked 20 people to define networking, you would get 20 different answers. And some people think it's all about how you find a new job or transition to a new career. Some people, which we've already touched on, unfortunately, think about networking as a way to get new clients. And then there's other people like us who view it as a way to develop effective and meaningful and mutually beneficial relationships with other professionals. And, one of the quotes I mentioned in the book from David Siteman Garland is that networking events are like nightclubs, and that everyone's looking for a professional one-night stand. And by comparison, if you stick with the dating analogy, if you were to read books for how to find, the love of my life or how to find my soulmate, those books don't begin, keep going to nightclubs and bars all the time. It's, go on double dates and leverage your friends and host dinner parties. And so I think that there's the time that people are spending going to these larger networking events. I'm really trying to get them to think about it and ask themselves if it's a good use of their time. And if they agree that maybe it's not, I'm offering up some things that worked well for me as an alternative and a way that they can use that time perhaps more effectively.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. When you talk about that whole nightclub effect, or the, just going out into groups of strangers and hitting on them, so to speak, it's like our business cards and our elevator pitches are like bad pickup lines almost.
Definitely. I mean, it's and it just makes the people that ideally the people that you want to meet are just they don't tolerate it as much. And I even go as far as I'm not suggesting that people stop going to networking events in favor of cold calling, but I compare the two from a time standpoint, a time management standpoint in the book. And unlike with cold calling, which is how I built my career, you're getting this negative feedback all the time. People are hanging up on you and they're standing you up even when they do schedule meetings with you. But you could just go to networking events all day long and meet nice people and have nice conversations with them and not really know that anything's wrong. And I think you go to just one or two networking events a week and you're trading that in for maybe 7 to 8 weeks worth of on time that you could be doing other things, as an alternative. Yeah,
definitely. And I can see how people, they really think of it that way in terms of, hey, I'm so for example, like here's a metaphor that I thought of as I was reading this. It was, that, for example, you break up, you quote unquote break up or have a divorce with a previous position or job, you know what I mean? And so then it's like all your friends are like, hey, get back out there. Hey, I know somebody that I could set you up with. And that would be better. Like you said, going out on double dates or going out with groups of friends and that kind of an environment versus just going out into singles bars and thinking that's going to, fix the situation.
Yep, 100%. And in fact, I mean, I use an acronym in the book for connector and sort of giving, if people go through the entire thing, I show them how they can put it all together and form their own 20-person group like I did. But it's also good standalone stuff in there, I think, for the right person who's reading it. But the TOR stands for trigger ongoing reciprocation. And what I like to suggest is that even if you are adding a lot of value and you're doing a lot of things for a lot of people, no one's ever going to set aside a half hour for you and say, now Eric's been so good to me, I'm going to refer him a few people, or I'm going to think about how I can make some good stuff happen for him. And I think that it's on us a little bit to make sure that we're making it easy for the people that want to help us to be able to do just that.
Right. So for example, if somebody were to say, hey, I need help networking, like you and at least one or two other people come to mind automatically, and it's because of our interactions previously and our ongoing connection. And because of that, you as well as me and others become top of mind when, that would be cool if somebody thinks productivity and suddenly my name comes to be top of mind and people refer, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And not in a like selfish way, but just in a, hey, I'm doing quality work and I'm doing it consistently. And the people that know about that, when somebody has a need that this fits, they just say, hey, check out Eric. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and to even take it a step further, because I think that's sort of like the low-hanging fruit.
Right.
And after the podcast that I've done up to this point, and you may do this, right, because I won't find out until tomorrow, but a number of them have sent an email to me saying, hey, if you know a few other people that would be ideal guests, and some are very specific and others are very vague, who would make a great guest for our show, would you mind letting them know about it? Well, that's one way, and I might have a few people in mind that could potentially be a great guest, but that takes a lot of time and effort. I have to go to your website. I have to figure out how I want to frame the introduction. And what I do often in my own businesses, and what one other person did, is they said, look, here is the 3-sentence blurb that I would love for you to just copy and paste or modify if you'd like, and use it when introducing me to somebody else. Or here's the form. So I think that the more of the work that we can do to make it easy for people that say, like, yeah, I would love to make this introduction to you, but every time I sit down at my computer, it's like, gosh, now what do I want to say and how do I want to say it? Anything that we can do to make it easier for our fans to help us out is going to be a good thing for everyone.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense. I tend to kind of move more towards the organic side of things with that. I like to seek out my own guests. I like to get the audience to tell me who it is that they like. In fact, here's an open call to the listeners right now. If there's somebody that you would like to hear me talk to about productivity, just let me know. Go to beyondthetodolist.com and shoot me a little feedback. There you go. Anyway,
nice.
and see what's cool. And see, the thing that I don't always like is when somebody says, "Hey, I should be a guest on your show," and I still don't know how to fully deal with that yet. I try to be polite and I try to say, look, I like to bring a high quality show by making it people that I am truly interested in. You know what I mean? And so, anyway, that's not to say that not everybody that writes me isn't interesting. It's just not always as easy a gateway to walk into and figure out, okay, what's the angle here? How do I bring this how do I learn from this as well as my listeners? You know what I mean?
No, absolutely.
So, but I think that, so you as a listener of the show, what are some of the places where productivity intersects into what you're talking about here in terms of networking?
Well, I would say that first and foremost, having two businesses, and with the book having just come out, it was almost like having a third business. Mm-hmm. One thing that's been very interesting is that the ancillary benefit of having multiple things going on is that it allows me to stick to my guns in terms of who is an ideal client and who's a good fit for me in a way that I was never able to do prior to having two businesses. So for example, when it was just the wealth management business, if I got a referral to someone and, they were asking a lot of questions about fees, or just they were saying things or doing things where I'm like, this person is not going to be like an ideal fit, but what else do I have to do with my time? So I'm going to make an exception and I'm going to figure out a way to make it work. And I think those relationships are oftentimes the ones that really just suck the life and the time out of us. And me having a couple things going on has given me the courage to be able to say, you know what, this is probably not a good fit. So I'm going to call it before we even go down that path together.
That's interesting. So you're saying actually sometimes it's good to have an intuition or at least develop one in terms of who you shouldn't be networking with.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's helped out definitely. I mean, as I was getting ready to launch the release or to launch my book, there were things that I just didn't have time to do everything leading up to that day, and I started outsourcing stuff to my virtual assistants and my in-person assistant that I probably would not have outsourced or transitioned over to them had it not been for the fact that I just didn't have time to do it, and I had to dig deeper, and I had to give up control over things that it might have taken me another couple of months before I actually did that. So, to a certain extent, being busier helped me make calls and on those types of things maybe earlier in the process than I would have otherwise. Right.
So, taking on that extra commitments even forced you to have to make those hard decisions about where you were going to spend your time, and you spending the time on the things that only you could do and letting others who could be delegated to do things that honestly you shouldn't have been doing at all.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing that I'll mention also is, are you familiar with an app called Contactually?
You know what? I feel like I've heard about this. How does this work?
All right, so it does a lot of things really well. I'm actually starting to use it as my CRM, but the core functionality of it is that you're allowed to put people into buckets that you make up. And so you could call them clients, you could call them influencers, you could call them prospective clients, and then assign a period of time that, okay, every 30 days, every 90 days, I want to make sure that we're in contact. And it will scan your email, it just runs in the background, your email, your social networks, and if that period of time goes by without you making contact with this person, you'll get a reminder saying, hey, it's been 30 days, so you might want to follow with your, one of your best clients.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I'll put that. You said it's Contactually?
Yeah, I'll send you the link for it. But
Cool.
they have great template features, and when I make introductions now, if I introduce you to somebody and I have two sentences that I use to describe you, and I introduce you to someone else, same thing for them. The next time I introduce you to someone else, I just have to do it manually the first time. It will remember that. It'll automatically pre-populate an email with the subject line, "You two should meet. Hey, Eric, meet Dave. Dave is blah, blah, blah," and vice versa, and it sends it out. So it makes it a lot easier to keep sending these introductions on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, definitely. I like that. I'm gonna have to check that out. So, I'll put the link to that in the show notes for this episode. It'll be beyondthetodolist.com/70. And let's see. Well, so we're talking about technology, and I think that's one of the cool things for me. And I don't know about you. I am more introverted than extroverted, but I can switch it on, so to speak. I've always said that the internet is kind of like my Iron Man suit. It lets me do so much more, but it's still at the core me, Tony Stark, in the suit. So it's not disingenuous. It's just that introverts get their energy from being by themselves and recharging, where extroverts, it's the exact opposite. They charge by plugging into other people. Where do you fall on the spectrum?
What's interesting is that the way you just described yourself is almost how I would describe me, in that I really am. If you were to say, Derek, do you want to next Friday night? Would you rather go out to dinner with your wife and one or two other couples that you know really well and have dinner together, or would you rather go to a big event with a room full of 100 people that you know? I would pick the former all day long. Even though I can turn it on, to use your words, turn it on with the best of them, and I enjoy it. But I think I've sort of fallen that ambivert category, to borrow the term from Dan Pink's book.
Nice, yeah. I think so. So we were both at a networking event, like a large one with lots of people at it at Social Media Marketing World, and so what's your strategy there when it's a large group of people? Do you kind of with that kind of approach? I know what mine was, and I was also suffering jet lag. So were you, actually. We're on the same time zone, and then we were over in 3 hours earlier. So, but what's your strategy when you go to a larger networking event? I know that, you're not saying don't go to networking events because they kind of focus or operate on networking 1.0, so to speak, terms, and some of the best of them actually operate on this unmarketing that you're talking about. But what was your strategy there?
So like you mentioned networking 1.0, which is where you're networking to benefit yourself immediately. Networking 2.0 is this idea where you're trying to benefit the person that you are meeting for the first time. And I think it's obviously, I'm a big fan of paying it forward, but I also think it's kind of weird. Like if I'd come up to you after saying, "Hey, Eric, Derek, nice to meet you. I'm a fan of your show. Hey, tell me about your business and how I can identify a good referral for you." That's kind of weird, I think, for me. Yeah. Like, why is he trying to do this? And I also think that you have a lot of the networking 1.0 crowd that have read articles and books that, hey, you should focus on the other person. So that leads to maybe some less than authentic asks in that department when people are meeting you. So this idea of networking 3.0 is where you're really focused on benefiting other people in your in your world already, your clients, in my case, cadre members as well. I don't know if you remember this or not, but after we met, I could have easily said, "Hey, Eric, you should have me on your show," or made it more about me. But I remember as soon as I had an opportunity, I walked you over to Marcus Sheridan because I know that the two of you hadn't met yet, and I said, because that's for me, if it's a way for me to add value for somebody that's already in my world without coming off to you like, hey, does this guy have a hidden agenda?
Yeah, totally. And I think that's the thing. I think that's the hardest part. And I think I think you'd probably just say it takes practice to move from the 1 to the 2 to the 3.0 version of this, where again, it's almost like networking karma, that you aren't thinking about yourself at all and you're being a selfless networker and you're only giving, but not in a forceful way, but in a a beneficial way that doesn't benefit you at all, really, and then it comes back around, like the whole karma thing.
Yep, definitely. That was just like a cool example of, and I think you guys connected it, but I knew Marcus liked you and you hadn't had a chance to meet him yet. So that's just, it doesn't always work, but very rarely will I say going to this networking event or this networking function was not a good experience, because I'm never thinking about me and how it's going to benefit me. I'm thinking about the people in my world and how I can make some good things happen for them.
Yeah. And so even though we're not operating on the older rule, so to speak, we still can benefit by going in with this totally other mindset when we go to even these strange, nightclub, so to speak, networking events, right?
Yeah, and I think social media marketing. I think anytime, like when we host events for Cadre and we bring in, we've brought in some pretty big speakers. I mean, we had Dan Pink and Gary Vaynerchuk and Mark Echo, and coming up in June we have one with John Jansen, Ryan Holiday. There's things that you can do if you're going to an event. If the event has really good speakers or really good content, then it makes it easier to justify spending an hour of your time going, because even if you don't meet anyone that ended up being a good connection for you or that you were able to hit it off with, you could still end up saying, wow, I learned a ton and therefore it was a good use of my time. So I think in deciding, do I want to go to this event or not, the more ways there are for you to be able to say it was successful in terms of was it a good use of my time, then the more you can justify going to that sort of thing.
It's funny that you put it like that, because I've actually heard I've totally benefited and had what you just described happen to me, but I've also had it happen the opposite way, and even had it be the opposite way for other people, where they'll tell me about a conference that they go to regularly, and it's not for the content whatsoever. It's because all of their people, their tribe, their family, so to speak, are there in town, and it's like a family reunion for them, and then that's why they're there, is to meet up with those people face to face that they only know digitally on a daily basis through Twitter and social and whatever. So that is
that's awesome.
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, because I've had that happen. I've had that happen where it's like I've walked away. Maybe there was one session out of many that was good or even great, but the rest were like, it was all right. It wasn't really my thing, but man, I got to hang out with these awesome people. Would I go back? Yes, because they'll be there again,
Sure.
So, and some of the best ones are like that, the new media expos, the social media marketing world, where it is kind of almost like that family reunion because I would go back to all of those because of the people and the content, for that matter, because it's always awesome to have so much to choose from. So,
yeah, and I have one coming up. Last year was the first year a buddy of mine, Jason Geiner, hosted this event called Mastermind Talks in Toronto, and that one's coming back up, or it's coming up in 3 or 4 weeks. And last year, it was 3,500 applications, and it ended up being 125 attendees. And he had Tim Ferriss and Mark Echo and AJ Jacobs, and just it's unlike social media marketing world, which is another one of my favorite conferences. Obviously, is that this one just is. You're just getting information and hearing from people all over the map. So it's really great from a personal development standpoint, and it's about to sell out without ever even going up for sale to the general public, because so many people that went last year are coming back again this year.
Wow, that's awesome. So in terms of people that are listening and they're like, well, I'm pressed for time and I can't always go to an event or whatever, and I want to get the most out of, I still want to practice 3.0 networking or unnetworking, but they want to get the most out of their time. They're, in other words, they want to apply productivity strategy to their networking. Where would you tell them to go to start doing that?
I think Twitter is a phenomenal networking platform, and it's a great place to not only practice but also succeed when it comes to networking 3.0. I wrote a guest post for Jay Bear last week that I can send that over to you that talks about sort of how we can do that. But I think that, obviously, I don't have to convince any of your listeners that, from a productivity standpoint, it'd be way better to hang out on Twitter than go to a 3-hour networking event. But I think there's a lot of good things you can do when just showing up and saying, okay, I'm thinking about my 5 or 10, or even if they're not clients, if they're just other influencers and people that you want to get on their radar, just listen and see what they have going on and what they need help with. And without sort of forcing it or being cheesy, if there's a way that you can make a connection or add value in some way, that's just a great way to begin any relationship.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great place. I love, honestly, Twitter's my favorite social network. It's where people can, I try to respond to everything. It's not always possible, but I try. And yeah, I think that's definitely it. I mean, it is the almost digital water cooler in a lot more ways than anything else. So
yeah, I agree.
Awesome. Okay, so Derek and I actually finished our call, and I'm dropping this in post because he shared something with me as we were talking that I think just needs to make it in the episode. And so, Derek, you're talking about being conflicted with this whole thing that people call work-life balance. Others have referred to it as blending. And I think you've got this really cool kind of way to psych yourself into it or set up your mental expectation. What's that story?
I was finding that come Tuesday, Wednesday night, I would be at the office 7 o'clock, 7:30, and I would start feeling guilty that I needed to go home and see my kids, that I wasn't necessarily being a good dad, and it was because I was mixing the work and the play a little bit too much. And what I decided to do, just one random Saturday morning, I said, I'm going to start my week on Saturday mornings instead of starting my week like most of us and like I'd always done on a Monday morning. And I just became completely present with my family and with my kids. I did not open my laptop at all. I didn't do work, and just really was 100% into them and what they were doing. And that just liberated me to where now I'm not conflicted anymore during the week because I put in the time with them. And it's obviously a mental thing. It's a self-manipulation thing that I'm just tricking myself and finding a way to, for me to justify it. But it's made a big difference for me because it's allowed me to really keep the two separate and be completely present with whatever I'm doing at any given time.
That's awesome. I think that's a really great thing. I think people should find their way of doing, if they're struggling with that they need to figure out their way of setting up those time boundaries to be able to shift back and forth. And, at what point are you in a place where it's, okay, I'm fully here where I'm doing this one thing, and then I'm fully here doing this other thing somewhere else? Because the whole crossover of what we think is working and multitasking in terms of our family and our work life, like, yeah, I get it. You can blend it. But at the same time, sometimes you've got to give full attention to the thing you're in front of, or you're just not paying attention to any of the things you think you're paying attention to, really.
Yeah, I mean, and for me at least, this mental trick, if you will, it's that I think because most of us start our weeks on Mondays, we're always sort of playing catch up in the family department, and so I've been able to convince myself that I'm by starting my week on a Saturday morning, I'm checking the box for the most important thing in my life, which is my wife and my kids. And then it's work that's playing catch up. I don't have this guilt that I had, for so long, leading up to this change.
That's awesome. Well, Derek, we've only touched on some parts of networking. People need to go grab the book. Networking is not working. What's the subtitle? I've got it here. Hold on. Stop collecting business cards and start making meaningful connections. So yeah, stop being stuffy and business-like about our business or relationship connecting and making it more about relationships themselves.
Yeah, definitely. You got it. I mean, it's going well. And like I said, it's like I think I mentioned to you, it's it's kind of like a productivity book disguised as a networking book, to a certain extent.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's awesome. So people can just get that from anywhere. Any specific place you want to send them so they can check that out?
Yeah, if they go to derekcoburn.com/book, the link for Amazon's there, but they can also download the first chapter. And I like you, I enjoy probably hanging out on Twitter more than any of the other social networks. And I'm on Twitter, I'm Cadre DC.
Nice. Awesome. Derek, it's been awesome to talk with you about this, and I can't wait to see you face-to-face again sometime soon. And thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, Eric, this was great. Thanks again. I really appreciate it and look forward to seeing you soon, hopefully, as well.
So I hope that you were able to apply as you listened and even think theoretically as well as practically ways that you can change your perspective on networking, and not just in the nitty-gritty details of how you do it, but in the big picture of what you're trying to accomplish with your networking and how the best ways to go about that are possible through some of the things that we talked about in this episode. Anyway, make sure to check out the book, Networking is Not Working, by Derek Coburn. In fact, let him know. Tweet him. Let him know. Let me know how much you enjoyed this episode. And again, thanks again to Boomerang for Gmail for sponsoring this episode of Beyond the To-Do List. Please go take advantage of their free 60-day trial of Boomerang for Gmail by going to boomeranggmail.com/todo. Again, if you're using Gmail, you owe it to yourself to try this 60-day free trial of Boomerang Professional. Go to boomeranggmail.com/todo and let me know what you think. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you next episode. Beyond the To-Do List is a proud member of the Noodle.mx Network. Find more of our award-winning and award-nominated podcasts to make you think, laugh, and succeed at Noodle.mx. Learn how to podcast. Theorize over the TV shows Once Upon a Time in Wonderland, and Under the Dome. Laugh with our clean comedy, delve into science fiction and philosophy, learn critical thinking from movie reviews, and more at Noodle.mx.